morning. It's an early start today, huh? And thanks for coming, we really appreciate it. And I'm here with me, I have KATERYNA ARGYROU. She's a leader of the Australian Federation of Ukrainian Organizations and represents a Ukrainian community in Australia. And I'm very pleased that she is with us. She is a mother of two. She works in the financial industry, but for the past 3 years, she's got three full-time jobs. You know, her full-time job in the company, full-time job with her 2 little kids, and of course full-time job fighting for Ukraine and being an advocate. But today is a very sad moment, and I'm very pleased that we have, of course, Alicia Payne MP and David Smith MP with us. Thank you for being and standing strong with us. As you know, support for Ukraine in Australia is bipartisan. Just last week I saw the leader of the opposition, Peter Dutton. He assured me of his support for Ukraine, and I had a meeting with the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese in January, and I received the same assurance. And also both of them have assured me that if they win, they will go to Ukraine. So this is a very positive sign. I'm very excited and pleased to see that support from both parties, and also from the crossbench. And I saw Senator David Pocock on Saturday. He came to our rally, so it was very good. And I've been in touch with, I was also in touch with Sally Zaxtal, and she's also very supportive. So this is a good sign that we are having. And you know, my message on the 3rd year of anniversary is to thank Australia for that support. You know, for us Ukrainians, seeing that support from 50,000 kilometers away is so uplifting. And Australia is doing the right thing of standing with Ukraine, because 11 years ago, Russia invaded Ukraine. Russia killed 38 Australians on the board of MH17. Russia killed thousands of Ukrainians, destroyed our civilian infrastructure, committed numerous war crimes, crimes against humanity. Russia must be accountable for what they've done. If aggressor is rewarded for what they've done, it's a very negative signal which is being sent to different other authoritarian leaders here in the region. And the world is watching, because security in Europe will define the security in the Indo-Pacific. We all know what's going to happen if might is right, if aggression is rewarded. This is something that Australia cannot afford. Supporting Ukraine is your investment into your own security. And I've said it many times, but I want to repeat it. Prime Minister of Japan, the previous one, he said, Europe today is Asia tomorrow. I disagree with him, because Europe today is Asia tonight. And when we talk about Asia, we talk about Pacific Rim, we talk about this region, this is what can happen. And therefore, we are fighting for you. We are fighting for democracy. We are fighting for human rights. At the end of the day, it's all about protecting the way of life. Just like here in Australia, democracy, prosperity, peace. This is what we want as Ukrainians. This is what we are fighting for. We want to get those rules back, the rule of law. And Russia is just, Russian leader is just a gangster who's got nuclear weapons, who's subjugating democracy next door. What kind of world are we getting in? How are we going to survive in the post-liberal world, as they call it now? I think countries like Australia, New Zealand, your Pacific friends here in the region, they all depend on the principle of sovereignty, which is enshrined in the UN Charter. And if that is dismantled as we see it, what kind of world it is opening up? How can Australia afford it? What will happen to your defense and to your security if one nuclear power, which is a permanent member of the United Nations, of the Security Council of the United Nations, can just use military power to grab land, to kill people, to rewrite history? Where are we going? Thank you. So I'd like to ask KATERYNA to also make some remarks, and I will answer your questions.
Thank you, VASYL. And thank you to everyone that has gathered here this morning. It's a pleasure to be here in Canberra, Parliament House, a place where I have walked the halls many times over the past 3 years with only one goal and one mission. That is to raise awareness about a brutal and full-scale war that is going on in Ukraine. It's to give examples of how my family has been impacted and how our community has been impacted. I have my entire family in Ukraine. I had 6 of my family members on the front line. I only have 2 now because the rest have been injured. My cousin is currently based in Sumy, who I visited just a few months ago, 28 kilometers from the Russian border. And what I can tell you about spending a week in Sumy and spending time with my cousin is that Ukraine is under attack every single day. While I was there, I heard the sound of Shahid drones that were flying over my head as I was cooking dinner for my baby. I flew with my little 10-month-old son. I heard ballistic missiles explode over my head as I went outside. I heard the stories, first-hand accounts of how brutal the Russians are on the front line. My cousin is a frontline medic that evacuates wounded soldiers on a daily basis. And I can tell you that when we hear headlines from other world leaders that are supposed to be leaders of the free world, saying that Ukraine's the one that started the war and that President Zelensky is a dictator, all I can say is that when the war started 3 years ago and we had Russian tanks rolling down the streets of Kiev towards my grandparents' place, towards my cousins and my parents, I can tell you they were Russian tanks, and I can tell you that it was Russia that started the war. When we hear comments about President Zelensky being a dictator, I'm sorry, all you have to do is look next door to see who is actually a dictator. President Zelensky was elected with over 70% of the popular vote, and he continues to work in Ukraine's best interests, despite the pressure that he is currently facing. So what I want to tell you from a Ukrainian community perspective is that we have suffered a lot over the past 3 years, and we don't want there is no other community that wants peace more than Ukraine and the Ukrainian community, but we would like a just peace. With over 140,000 war crimes that have been committed and registered in Ukraine, we would like justice for that. We would like the war criminal that is President Putin to be held accountable. We would like to see him at an international war crimes tribunal, not sitting at the negotiating table talking about Ukraine without Ukraine. I think Ukraine deserves to have a seat at that negotiating table to decide its own future and to discuss the path forward towards peace. And the path towards peace must be based on truth, not untruth, lies, and practically lines straight out of the Kremlin playbook that we are currently seeing in global headlines. Also, I would like to let you know that not only has our community felt the impacts of war firsthand, we have approximately 5,000 refugees, displaced Ukrainians, that have entered our shores seeking refuge and seeking a safe haven from Russian missiles and bombs. They've had their families torn apart, their homes destroyed. So we know exactly what the impact of this full-scale invasion has been. With us this week, we also have a Ukrainian defender, a 21-year-old boy that left his family behind, his mother, his 2 sisters, his girlfriend, to go and defend Ukraine on the front line, just at 18 years old. His name is Nazar Kolsankava. We currently have him in Sydney, and he's going to be undergoing full limb reconstruction surgery at the MACKAY University Hospital because of an enemy attack from the Russian Federation that has now completely left his right leg deformed and unable for him to perform his daily tasks. And that is what we are dealing with as a community. We're dealing with family members that are under daily attack. We're dealing with community members that have lost loved ones, sons, fathers, husbands, and we are dealing with trying to rehabilitate those that have been impacted by the war and to provide some sort of medical assistance to them. Our community feels the pressure firsthand, and that is why today across every single city, every single state and territory, there will be events held commemorating the 3rd year anniversary to mark Russia's full-scale and brutal invasion of Ukraine, and we will continue to advocate with the Australian government for their support. Considering there is a lack of moral leadership in other parts of the world, it's an opportunity for Australia to show courage, to show moral leadership, and to continue to stand with Ukraine, as both sides of government have continued to say that they will. Thank you.
Ambassador, can I ask you about President Zelensky's comments overnight that he would be happy to give up the presidency if it meant ending the war? What kind of message do you think that sends to the world, those comments?
It sends a message which President Zelensky has been demonstrating throughout the past 3 years. That was a stellar leadership that President Zelensky has demonstrated. We all remember when he got out of his office, when Russians were in Kiev, and he recorded that message, "I'm here, my team is here, and we're here to fight." He was offered to take a ride, but he said, "I don't need a ride, I need ammunition." And that leadership has inspired the world, and the fierce resistance of the Ukrainian people, and the resilience of the international coalition of countries That coalition of countries was created by the US government and British government, and I'm very pleased that Australia has joined and contributed to that. 50 nations decided to stay strong with Ukraine, send weapons to Ukraine, and defend democracy. And for us, and President Zelensky, what he said in a comment yesterday, of course, we are talking about long-term peace. Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014 when we were a neutral country. Russia invaded Ukraine because they wanted to invade Ukraine. Their goal is to subdue Ukraine, destroy our sovereignty, annex Ukraine, and just that will be kind of their end goal, and which they are continuing pursuing. They were emboldened by the weak reaction after 2014. 8 years later, they came back with a much bigger war. This is what has happened. And now, President Zelensky is saying that he's ready to step down if Ukraine is admitted into NATO, because we are talking about security guarantees. And Article 5 on NATO is the only security guarantee which will be viable and probably the cheapest one that we have. NATO accession is part of, it's enshrined in Ukraine's constitution. It's supported by the majority of the Ukrainian people. It's part of the decision made at the NATO Washington summit. So this is what we are striving for. Because we look into the future beyond the next 4 years. Because what is a guarantee? Russians will not restock, resupply, because Russians actually need that break. Because we destroyed lots of their equipment, their jets, and their personnel. So they need time to resupply, regroup, and mount another attack. But for us, if we want long-term peace, we want something which is sustainable, robust, and something that will be, and also justice needs to be achieved. Russians must be held accountable for what they've done in Ukraine.
Do you think those comments are in response to some of the pressure that's been heaped on President Zelensky by President Donald Trump in the US?
Security of Europe depends on American leadership. And that's been like that after the Second World War since 1949, right? And it's all part of the way and the story and the history of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. This is how it was established. So American commitment to Europe is the backbone of European security. No European security cannot be achieved without a strong commitment from America. To achieve a long-lasting peace, we need Ukraine, we need Europe, and we need America standing there together with us and negotiating with Russia from a standpoint of strengths. Peace through strengths, this is what it means. Therefore, we are working on that and making sure that everybody is involved. Because at the end of the day, the Budapest Memorandum in 1994, when we gave up our nuclear weapons, there were signatures of Russia, of the US, of Britain, of France, and of China. They all signed that document, and we gave up the third largest stockpile of nuclear weapons in the world by making the biggest contribution to the global peace. And that's a commitment we made, and this is a commitment why those countries have been supporting us. They've been fulfilling the commitment of the Budapest Memorandum. That was the reason for that. Because under that document, our sovereignty was guaranteed, and that was so blatantly dismantled by Putin. Because he just had a fantasy that he can revive Soviet Union, he can revive the empire.
Ambassador, are you satisfied by the Australian government's kind of response to President Trump's earlier comments about, President Zelensky being a dictator? Are you satisfied by Australia's response to that?
I'm satisfied with how Australia reacted to this war. For Australians don't tolerate bullies. And it's pretty clear who's evil, who's good, who's David, who's Goliath in this fight. It's black and white for every Australian I met here. And Australia reacted strongly to that when there was a coalition government when the war broke out. And then the Labour government picked up. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese went to Ukraine on the 5th week on his job. Last year, we had Deputy Prime Minister Rich Marles, Foreign Minister Penny Wong in Ukraine during 1 year. Australian leaders don't go to Europe that often, but 2 of your senior leaders were in Ukraine during 1 year. Shadow Foreign Minister Simon Birmingham was there in August.
But do you perhaps want Australia to use its kind of diplomatic leverage with the US more in this situation?
I'm satisfied with what Australia is doing, extremely grateful for Australian government for their support. And it's all about what else we can do, what is at stake, why does it matter for Australia? And we are talking about insecurity implications a lot, right? Because they are there, they are visible, we see how they are impacting security in the region. We see the impact of this war on inflation, we see the impact of this war on the cost of living. But we have to remember there is also a positive externality to this war, which needs to be acknowledged. During the past 3 years, because of the surging prices for commodities that were generated because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, The prices for coal, the prices for oil, the prices for copper and other minerals, as well as for agriculture commodities have surged, which actually enabled Australia to generate additional revenue into the budget. We estimate that during the past 3 years, an additional $100 billion were generated extra as a result of this brutal war in Europe. So the budget surpluses of 23 and 24 were thanks to this. It was a positive externality. I'm not saying that because, you know, that as an argument why Australia should be doing more. It just needs to be acknowledged. It's just a fact. And I got assurances both from the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition that after the elections, we'll work on what is possible, what could be done on our bilateral level. And I see many opportunities for your businesses, for your mining companies to help to Ukraine, to make money in Ukraine, to help us develop, together with Americans, to help us develop those critical minerals resources, rare earth minerals resources, help us rebuild energy infrastructure. So I see how Australian businesses can benefit from helping Ukraine, together working with the government on rebuilding Ukraine. So it goes beyond statements. It goes, you know, it's more strategic. And I think we have to be looking at this from a strategic point of view of what is at stake for Australia, why it is important to continue supporting Ukraine. It's not charity. It's an investment into your own security. It's an investment into the security in Europe. It's an investment in the security in the Indo-Pacific.
Ambassador, do you agree with President Zelensky's comments there? Do you think that he should stand down if that's what he's feeling?
Absolutely. He's my president. He appointed me. I totally agree with him. And I came here 1 month into the war. And let me tell you, I was still in Ukraine when the war broke out. And I was there, you know, waking up 5 o'clock in the morning. My family, my 18-year-old daughter, my 5-year-old son, and I could hear explosions. Russian paratroopers were landing 20 minutes away. Today on ABC this morning, I said, imagine you live here in Dixon and your enemy troops are landing in Belconnen. This is what we have in Ukraine. And you having kids in your home, staying there with your kids, seeing Russians landing 20 minutes where you live. How would you feel? How would you react to that? This is what we Ukrainians had to go through. I came here 1 month later. But for me, I was able to visit Ukraine 9 times since I've been here. So I'm in Ukraine every 3 months. So I can see what an impact this war is having on the people. And we all know we can end this war in 24 hours. Russians just need to get out of Ukraine.
Sorry, Ambassador. Are you worried about the fact that President Trump was floating the idea of ruling, or his government was floating the idea of ruling out NATO membership and giving up territory to Russia before negotiations had begun, and as you both pointed out, without Ukraine at the table?
We have to look, it's too early to judge. I mean, we have to look at the facts, and Ukraine in leadership is talking continuously to the leadership in America. As you know, there was a phone call between President Trump and President Zelensky, which followed meetings between President and the Secretary of Treasury in Kyiv, more meetings at the Munich Security Conference with the Vice President and the Secretary of State. Then President Zelensky hosted a special envoy, Keith Kellogg, in Kyiv. And on Saturday, our foreign minister had another phone call with Secretary Rubio. So we maintain very close contact with the top team of Donald Trump on figuring out the way forward. We are also consulting our European leaders. President Macron has been hosting 2 summits last week dedicated to what should be the response of Europe. And let's look at the assistance to Ukraine. EU has provided nearly the same of what America has provided in assistance to Ukraine. But if you also add the UK there, Switzerland, Norway, which are not EU members, but also have been extremely supportive of Ukraine, Europe has provided more assistance to Ukraine than America. But of course, it's, you know, America and the US, and of course Canada there. We should also mention Canada, which has been a strong supporter of Ukraine. And we're all standing there together.
Ambassador, apologies if I'm taking you over ground you've already covered, but President Zelensky's offer to resign in the interests of peace or NATO membership, is that tokenism, or do you think there would be a genuine help to the process if President Zelensky quit?
President Zelensky made it very clear, if we can achieve peace, if Ukraine can become a NATO member state, he's ready to step down. And I think that's very important to keep this in mind, the sequence of what needs to happen. Because President Zelensky demonstrating the leadership, because he wants long-term peace, not only the ceasefire, which can be temporarily, because truce can welcome more aggression. He wants peace long-term, beyond 4 years, for the next decades. You have to remember that Ukrainians have experienced over 200 years of Russian colonialism. We experienced a genocide in the 20th century, which killed over 4 million people in a man-made starvation. We survived the Second World War. Do you know that during the Second World War, Ukraine lost more people than Britain, France, and US combined? We will survive this war. But we need the leadership, and I think we need long-term security guarantees which can get us that peace forever as we move forward.
But Ambassador, would his resignation assist peace or not?
I think President Zelensky was very clear that if Ukraine can get into become a member state of NATO, he's ready to resign. I think he was very clear in his comments, and he made it at the press briefing yesterday. And he said that he's not holding to his chair, he's not holding to his job, if Ukraine can get a long-term, lasting, comprehensive, and just peace.
Has he been bullied by President Trump?
I'm not here to comment on President Trump, to be frank. I'm here to talk about Australia and Ukraine and why America matters to everybody and why American leadership is so important for your own security, why American leadership is important for European security. We're all in the same boat. We're all there fighting for democracy and human rights and all the values.
With respect, Ambassador, how can you not comment on President Trump when he causes such an abrupt change in policy of so much importance to your country?
I'm happy to talk about that, and of course for us and for everybody else, American support was essential, and that American support during the past 3 years and leadership, American leadership, created that coalition of countries together with Britain in support of Ukraine. Without American leadership, probably we'd see Russia now in Kiev. This is what would have happened if we didn't get the assistance we got from US, from Britain, and from other countries, including Australia. And I think this needs to be recognized, and we need to make it sure. You know, previously when President Trump was the president before, he authorized the sale of javelins to Ukraine. These are anti-tank weapons. Those javelins, by the way, were instrumental in helping us destroy those Russian tanks which were rolling into Ukraine in 2022. So we have to look back at some of the legacy from previous times, and we rely on American leadership, on American wisdom to have this end this war, because we want this war ended, you know, more than anybody else. But we just want to make sure that it's robust, it's durable, it's sustainable, and it can last a long time, or forever.
And my last question, Ambassador, the most important message you have today for Australians?
My most important message is to express my gratitude to Australian people, to Australian government, everybody I met during the past 3 years. They all, you know, expressed strong support for Ukraine. I haven't met many people who don't support Ukraine. And Australians are advocating for more military assistance to Ukraine, Australians are advocating for more humanitarian assistance, Australians are advocating for more economic assistance to Ukraine. And I think this is the reason why we are supported by the Australian government. This is the reason why we have support from the opposition, why we have support from the crossbench. I think what we are fighting for, we are fighting for way of living, which is democracy, prosperity, peace, something which is cherished by every Australian.